Okay, so today we're going to have a look at a bit of baking and substance painter. I've had a few people, mention, or I've seen a few comments. Doesn't seem to be that well understood. So what I'm going to do initially is I'm going to start a new scene, and I'm going to just use PBR Alpha Blend starter assets, and I'll put a 2048 texture on it, and we'll leave it at DirectX for the minute. And I have now a just an object that I use perhaps to test baking, so I'm just going to open that. There we go. And now we have our little object here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So I've got some angles, I've got some curvy bits, I've got some sunk in bits, and I've got some extruded out bits. That's all I really need, just to look at the maps and see whether my settings are about right. So if we go to texture set settings and click on this little square icon here, we get to the bank mesh maps, and because I used that starter assets option, this has reset it to just standard settings. So initially I'm going to use set my output size to 2048. I generally match my output size here to my output size for my texture, just to keep things consistent. And I find that a larger output size here gives me a slightly better map. There's more resolution in it. It can pick up more variation and detail. So other than that, if I bake this now, it will bake with all the standard settings, and then we're going to go in and just change some settings. There we go. So that'll bake them all. Now some of these maps I don't generally change. Like the normal, if I'm not baking it, I'll do another video on baking normals. And the world space and the ID, they're generally just kind of work. But ambient occlusion and curvature and position is fine, and thickness, these can be changed to give you different or better effects. So we'll start with our ambient occlusion, and as you can see, this is baked quite nice. It's not dreadful. So I do have this going a little bit too far for my liking, so this is nearly reaching the top here, and that's I want to soften that up a bit. So we can go back into our bank maps. If I use this little fly out and deselect, and then just pick the ambient occlusion map, and then click on the ambient occlusion options, and these are the default options. So we've got a minimum occlusion distance. It won't go any smaller than that. It won't go to 0. And we have a maximum occlusion distance. So the maximum occlusion is too far. So if I say drop this back to around about half, and then bake that again, it goes a bit nuts on my screen, but that's only the display. You can see that I think it's softened here, but it's still reaching up a little too far. So actually for that one, I'm going to change my max occlusion distance down to 0.25. I'm using my general law of halves. It started at 1, it's too much, halve it again. So let's bake that. Again, my display has gone a bit crazy. It does that, and it's starting to come down a little bit. It's not quite as prominent there. It's definitely not as prominent here. So it's still too prominent for my liking, so again I use my law of halves, 0.125, and then we'll bake that again. There we go. Now you can see that this is not reaching up as high as you might think. This is basically just around the edge, or where the occlusion I would want it to be, at least. Okay, so that's pretty nice. So I'm happy with that that setting. At the end of this, what I'll do is I'll save this as a preset, so you can know how to reuse them. So next of all, we'll have a look at the curvature map, and we'll do that in the next section, so I'll leave this nice and sort of compartmentalized. So I will talk to you then. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little demo here. If I go back to my material setting, I'm going to go onto my layers and just pop on a smart material. So I've got a painted metal down here somewhere which just kind of highlights the edges, and that mainly uses the curvature to drive that. So as you can see with this map, I'm picking up curves here, I'm picking up curves around here, and they're all quite tight and, you know, not very exciting. Personally, I prefer to have a little bit of a bigger map and then, you know, try and you know, tighten it down. And the way you can do the tightening is if you go on to our paint here, it's under this, there we go, this black mask. If I pick this mask editor, oh, it's really slow today, and down here I have curvature options, and if I go to there, so the curvature is kind of split into big features or huge features, big features, large features, medium, fine and sharp. And you know, you can to a certain extent adjust these to get effects. So I could even, you know, go, you know, really crazy with it. But you know, what I want is for this smart material to work as I want to work it without having to fiddle with these things down here. So that would mean I need to, you know, adjust the map. So we'll go back into our baking maps again, turn off ambient occlusion, turn on curvature, and select the curvature options. Now one of the things I like to do here is just to increase the raise. 256 doesn't slow my machine down, it might slow yours down. You might need to, you know, tack it back until it becomes a bit more usable. So the main thing here is this sample radius. So currently we have two modes. We have with the bounding box, or relative to the bounding box, or non-relative to the bounding box. Now with relative to bounding box selected, I have a bit of a limit as to what I can put in here. You know, no matter what I type in, it's not going to overdo it. But if I turn that off, I can overdo it. I happen to know that that's a really crazy number, but we'll do it anyway. So if I bake that, you see that, you know, that's really not sensible. So if I come back to my options here, I'm just going to type in a more sensible number. So if I go down to 0.1 and then bake that one, there we go. You see now I've got really exaggerated edges, and if I go to my layer again and go to my mask editor, I can adjust these down, and you'll see that I've got not an awful lot of control. Everything's working off the sharp. I can get some nice effects with that, that's alright, I like that. But maybe, you know, it's a little bit too thick, if you like. So back to my texture set settings and click the little box, there we go, and bake my maps. Where am I? I want curvature. So I'm going to take my sample radius down and say 0. What did I have in there? Oh, it's not going to undo now. The 0.01 didn't I? So I want 0.025 to quarter that down, and then I can bake my selected textures. And now when I look at my maps, you'll see that my fine detail is really narrowed down, or my sharp detail rather. If I start to introduce the fine, that gives me a bit more. If I increase the soft, that gives me more again, and so on and so forth. So the further I go, you know, the more you know, the better it looks basically. Just going to even these up a bit. But again, it might even be still too thick, and it's going to depend project to project. But I like to try and find some sort of sensible kind of thing before I go. So I'm going to halve this again. So 0.125, 0.0125. There we go. And let's bank that out. Okay. So now I'm getting a little bit more control. I can perhaps back some of these off. I might even increase some of these larger ones. So that does quite a nice job of really breaking it up, but it's just breaking it up way too much. Let's take some of these down. There we go. I don't like that I've got these like bars here, so if I increase the higher values I should start to erode those and eventually get rid of them. Perhaps getting rid of them completely is not my main intention, but that's up to you essentially. So the balance between the map and the control you have over the map in your masks, you can get various effects, but on the default settings I think it's too narrow. I think you need a little, and it will largely a lot of the time depend upon the model you're doing. If you have a very, very smooth model, you're not going to get much at all. If you've got a very, very tight angular model like parts of this are, you're going to get some nice effects, and if you've got some curvy bits you're going to get some intermediate kind of things. So just play around with those settings until it comes to a way that feels right and natural to you. I'd like to stress that there is no real correct setting. It's what you like, and it's what you work well with. I would like to point something out on this. While on the curvature map, if we go and have a look at that, we have white edges and we have black edges. Now you'll notice that if I switch this back to material now, the black edges are not being affected, the white edges are. So for this kind of mask technique, you're looking at the white ones to be actually to actually do what you want them to do. If we went into the layer again, and on the mask editor, I imagine we have an invert here somewhere. So under curvature we can invert that, and that will essentially give us the opposite way around. And you can use the invert to get different effects and get it looking the way you want it to, which is what you always want. Okay, so next we'll have a look at the thickness map, I think. So I will talk to you then. Okay, so the thickness is exactly what it says. It's detecting the thickness of the mesh, and it's terrific for things like subsurface scattering, because you can direct that subsurface scattering to where the mesh is really thin. With this model it's not really all that appropriate, but it's an effect, so we're going to have a look at it. So I'm just going to create a couple of layers, and I don't really want anything but colour and rough on these, and I want the top one to be shiny, and we'll make it, I don't know, a red colour, and the bottom one I want to be dull. So once I've turned these off, we'll set rough right up, and well, let's have some sort of pinky colour in the middle. There we go. So to use the thickness map, I'm going to right click and add a black mask, and then right click and add a generator, and in the generator we're going to pick the mask editor. And when my PC wakes up, there we go, you'll see it comes in with some default settings. I'm just going to turn that off. It comes in with 0.5 of curvature. Just going to take that down so there's nothing there. So let's go down. So we have the thickness map. So if I turn the thickness opacity right up, that's what the map is doing. It's highlighting that the corners are close together, obviously because they're at 90 degrees, and that's a thin part of the mesh. but nothing else is really picking up. So what we'll do is have a quick look at the thickness map, and then we'll rebake it to see what we can do. So if I go to thickness and select its options, it's ticked now. So we've got a minimum and a maximum distance. So at this sort of distance, it's not doing anything. You know, it's, you know, just picking up the fact that the corners are quite close together. But if we increase this, let's say to 0.5, and then rebake it, and then say OK, you'll see our map looks quite a bit different. Our edges are darker, they're pushing out even further because the edges are detecting more of you know, the polygons around them, and in places we've got quite a lot going on. There we go. So let's see what that's done to our material. So our material is now much more you know, dispersed. You know, previously it was only just a really tight edge of the lower layer coming through. Now we've got, you know, quite a lot of it coming through. And of course, within the thickness options in the mask editor, we still have options we can do. We can blur, we can tighten it up with the contrast. You can really see it there, look. We can change the brightness, you know, to get the kind of mix that you want. So I would suggest messing around with the baking option there. I think perhaps I've gone a little bit too far, so I'm just going to come in here and change that down to 0.25 and then rebake, and there we go. That's what we get in the end. So yes, when you want to do an effect that's dependent upon how thick your mesh is, you know, the thickness is your friend. So yes, if you're not doing a model where that's important, then don't worry about it. If you are, that's where the options are, and that's what you can do with it. So let's just go down here again. What else have we got? We have relative to bounding box again, and we have a spread angle. So the spread angle is at 180 degrees. So let's reduce that. I'm going to go to 89, so just below 90, and let that bake. And yeah, let's actually look at the map itself. It's going to be more important. You see that here we're not getting much between these pieces, so let's go back and reset that to 180 and see if there's a difference. Yes, see, because we've reduced that spread angle, you know, we're picking up less of these edges. So these 90-degree edges are very much being picked up, and these ones are being picked up because, you know, they are within the 180-degree range. But if we rebake, then where's bake? Where's the options? There we go. So I'll take that, say, down to, I don't know, let's say, well, let's use 89 again just for fun, and rebake those. Then, you know, we lose those pieces, and, you know, that gives us an interesting effect, because, you know, in this case, you know, the white is going to be, you know, shown, so, you know, where those corners are, it's not going to do anything. And because, you know, we can control that, you know, we have all sorts of options for, you know, making it work as we want to. I wonder what happens if we go the other way. So let's go bank mesh maps and go to, say, 270 and bake that out. Yeah, not a lot of difference. I wonder if we go to 360, that might be a bit nuts. I might break the internet with this one. Ah, you see my spread angle didn't go beyond 180. I wonder if I turn the bounding box whether I can overdo that. No. Okay. Distribution wise, we have cosine and uniform. So cosine will be a a gradual drop off, and the uniform will be basically a uniform drop off. So let's bake that one. Yeah, see that uniform drop off I think gives a smoother option. I see less harsh lines, which I think is a good option. And where else have we got? Let's pop that back to cosine. Self collision always, only on same mesh name. That, you know, in this case there is only one mesh, and it's all joined together. But if you have more than one mesh in your scene, then you can use only same mesh name, so that they don't interfere with each other. But if you have one model, even if it has separate geometry, putting it to only mesh name will make no difference. And we have normalization relative to min-max per UV tile. You can experiment with this, of course, and relative to ray distance. Let's try that one. And yeah, here we get nothing. And we also have min-max per tile, which is default, and we have none. And none gives us a certain result. Looks very much like the original. So yes, experiment is what I always say. You know, get the effect you want. It will take some time. It can take some time to experiment. I know that. But you know, frankly, it's the only way you get the results you want. You know what's in your mind as a texture artist. You know, I don't. And I'm not even going to attempt to tell you that I know, you know, better, because I don't. I really don't. Okay, so that's baking the thickness map. So we've gone through the basic effect maps of ambient occlusion and curvature and thickness. You know, they're the ones mainly used by the generators. But I will do another video where I do normal maps, baking from a high to a low, and some of the, you know, problems you can get and how to get over them. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so the last thing to do is to save these into a preset, and we do that up here with File and Save as Template, and then you give your template a name. So this one I'm just going to call John's General, and when I click Save, that will now appear in my options. It might not appear immediately, I might have to close, but when we go to these templates, we should see, there we go at the top there, John's General. And if I go and pick my object again, my document resolutions, that's all fine. Discard that. All my bake settings should now be as they were. See, it's even, you know, left them unticked where I wanted them ticked. It's my foolish mistake. So, you know, I can rebake this model in exactly the same way as I've done previously. I don't have to keep fiddling around. You know, I can, you know, have a fairly standard starting point. Okay, so that's the end of this bit, or this video. I hope you found something useful in it, and I will talk to you again soon.